All right, so I am here with a good friend of mine as we continue this Black History Month. Oh, we might start now. As we continue this Black History Month, I have a good friend here with me has decided to be interviewed, Mr. Christian Lassiter. He is here. We have known each other for the last several years through church, but I feel like this is a good brother of mine and has agreed to be interviewed. He is a public defender, and Christian, I want to give you an opportunity just to state your position, who you are, and what you're about, and then we'll jump into these questions.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for having me, Mike. My name is Christian Lassiter. I'm an attorney. I work at the Federal Public Defender Office in Maryland. My actual office is in Baltimore. There are two locations for our office, one in Baltimore, one in Greenbelt next to DC. There's two courthouses also in Greenbelt and in Baltimore as well. So essentially what my office does and what I do is if someone is arrested and they're charged with a federal crime and they cannot afford an attorney, then they are appointed attorney from our office. Federal charges are a lot different than the state charges, usually much more serious. There's not as many of them. Also, as a result of that, it costs a lot more to hire a lawyer to be in federal court. So we get the majority of the clients that come through the federal courthouse for sure. So yeah, I've been an attorney now for 12 years. I went to law school in Cleveland at Case Western Reserve University. I went to undergrad at Howard University in DC. I'm a proud Bison. That's part of who I am.
Is that the real HU? I just want to know which HU is it?
Well, we're the real HU. Hampton, honestly, my father went to Hampton, and honestly, it's a friendly rivalry. I want to make that clear. Like we talk junk to each other, but it's friendly. Hampton was actually originally Hampton Institute, HI. Howard was always Howard University. And in fact, my father, like I said, he graduated from Hampton. His degree says Institute on it, right? They changed to Hampton University, I want to say in 1983. So whatever, it's a friendly rivalry and stuff like that. But if we're gonna say who was the real HU, we were the first ones.
Right. I just want to make sure we get that straight for the kids are going to be watching this that are intending on going to one of the two. Yeah. I just want to make sure they know which one is the real one.
Yeah, it's Howard. All day. It's Howard.
So tell me a little bit about your overall background, your family background, where you grew up, what your upbringing was like, and what you were like in high school.
Sure. So my family is originally, both of my parents are from New York City. They met there. They were both public school teachers in the South Bronx, and they met and they taught at the same school. That's how they met. I grew up and down, or more up the East Coast, if that makes sense. We kept moving away. My mother she lived in the South Bronx and wanted to start a family, but didn't necessarily want to live there at that time. It was a pretty rough time. In the early 80s in the South Bronx was pretty messed up. So we moved to Connecticut first for a while, lived there until I was, 9 or so. And then we moved up to Massachusetts in and around Boston. And that's where I finished up high school and stayed out there until I went to college. As far as me in high school, it's interesting to think back on it a little bit. I played some sports. I did basketball, I did track. It was interesting. Me going to Howard University was a big deal for me personally, because I always had I was kind of torn in two different directions. I had a lot of friends that weren't necessarily thinking about college or necessarily thinking about being a lawyer. I thought that was one of the things I was thinking about being when I was in high school. And then and they were in certain classes. And then my school would put me in more of the advanced classes where I was the only Black face in the room.
Right.
And I had this back and forth. So anyway, I was kind of known as one of the smartest Black people in the school. I don't know how else to say it. I went to a school that was about a third Black and the rest is white. So I was kind of known as that for whatever reasons.
Yeah.
But, got along with everybody. It was fun. I played sports.
So it would surprise anybody right now from high school for you to be an attorney and be doing what you're doing. People wouldn't be like, whoa, I didn't think you'd be doing that, Christian. It wouldn't be a surprise.
Not to everybody, no. To some people, maybe. I had some people that discouraged me in some ways, or it was kind of two. I had some people that expected me to do things like this, right? And then I had also some people that kind of discouraged me from ever doing those type of things and said that I couldn't do it, or that I wouldn't, I would fail out, I'd come back home, you know what I mean? So like it kind of went both ways actually,
Mm.
uh, with me. So yeah, I think overall, if you ask people, they would say they weren't surprised by it now. But I mean, it's easy to say that now, obviously. At the time, I don't know if they would have pegged me to be a lawyer.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
First one in my
So
family. So.
yeah, I mean, I had to say that because sometimes, and I talked with the person, we interviewed last, and like, we went to high school together, and it was just one of the things we talked about. Like, what was the expectation? Like, we didn't realize when we were in high school, the expectation for us was very low. We didn't realize that till we got older. You start doing the things you're doing, and then people, may make comments like, "Hey, good for you, Christian, that you're doing what you're doing." You're like, What did you expect I would be doing? You know what I mean? That type of thing. So I keep it real. So I had to ask that because I was just curious. Growing up somewhere a little bit different than Maryland,
Mhm.
did you kind of go through some of that stuff? So
Absolutely. Absolutely. A lot of people would discourage it, or some people, I didn't come from a background of lawyers. I just didn't. My parents were school teachers, and honestly, they were in a more professional setting than a lot of my other friends' parents were, who was around, right? Even family members of mine, right? And I think that kind of shapes what you think your ceiling is until you do it yourself, right? And you never know until you actually do it. And I think for me, I said it before, going to Howard University really changed my perspective on things because I had never seen a big amount of our people, of Black people, doing big things, making history. I just hadn't been around that ever in my life. So
Mhm.
without that, I can't tell you where I'd be. They might have been right had I stayed back around Boston and just stayed in school out there instead of going to Howard.
Right. So when did you first got interested in your current career? Was it before you went to Howard? I know you mentioned it in high school a little bit, and like who or what was like your motivating factor in becoming like a lawyer?
I think for me, generally, so I was always interested in kind of like history, social science, and stuff like that. My father had encouraged me to go into that type of. I did political science, for example, as my major when I went to college, and he's the one that told me to do that. I didn't know otherwise. I was just kind of like, I need to go to college, right? Because that's what you do. Um, for me, Johnny Cochran was a big deal for me personally. And it's funny to talk to like kids now because they're, you hear about OJ. You don't understand that his trial was like a year of our lives, and it was on
Mhm.
every single day.
Right.
And I just remember thinking about and seeing him and how cool he was, and not only that, how good he was.
Right.
How he could speak and keep people's attention, and everyone respected him. And I hadn't seen much of that for our people, for Black people, outside of maybe athletes, celebrities, right, movie stars, that type of stuff. I hadn't seen that much for me.
Mhm.
I just remember he always caught my attention. I was like, man, he's cool. I'd love to do that type of thing.
Mhm.
So that drew me to the legal field and maybe defending people. Um, and I also, it was funny, I had at one point I had been told, and it made sense that I would go to defend people because I had seen a lot of Black people that weren't defended. And I'd seen it in my family, I'd seen it in my friends in my community. I had a really good friend of mine, his older brother actually, football player was, and you could think about this, he was a quarterback and great athlete, running quarterback, but he could throw too, right? He was really good. And he got recruited by Michigan, like the Wolverines. And he was going to be a freshman the year that Charles Woodson won the Heisman Trophy and they won the championship. So that was a big deal.
Yeah.
And he got arrested and he took a plea agreement he shouldn't have, and it ruined his life. He's been in and out of jail since then. So I've just seen these things in life and knew what it was like for him. And remember going to a couple court appearances and watching it and seeing what he looked, like the entire room was just kind of focused on him and he's the bad guy and no one was protecting him. And I was like, I don't want to ever have anyone feel like that, especially in that setting when he was one of, you kind of have the audience and you got like this row that kind of separates the audience from like the court proceedings. And he was the only face that wasn't white past
Mhm.
that row. And it
Wow.
just felt horrible. It just felt horrible to watch him go through that. And I'll never forget that feeling, and that was just something that kind of drew me to it.
Right. Awesome, man. So getting into like how you became a lawyer, what did it really take for you to do that and get in your current position? Like what certifications? Obviously, you have to have degrees, but just for everybody to understand, what does it take to become a lawyer?
So first you have to go to undergrad. get your 4-year undergraduate degree, or if you can do it faster, cool. But get your undergrad degree. And then from there, you have to take what's called the LSAT. It's kind of like the SAT, but for law school. Take that test. It's not like a pass or fail. You get a score, and then schools rank the scores, and that's part of their equation of who they let in. But then you apply to law school. It's 3 years of law school. Once you finish that, then you have to take a bar exam in a certain state and then practice there. I work in the federal court here, so I took the bar exam in New York. I used to practice in New York City before I came here. Practiced there for about 8 years, and then came down here. And when I was here now, because I have the license in New York, there's a way that I can waive in, meaning just fill out paperwork and practice in the federal court here. That's
really?
Yeah.
Okay, because I always thought that like if you went to a different state, you had to take, that exam, the bar exam over again to practice law in that state. Does that happen for different states, or just New York to Baltimore has kind of like that agreement?
No, so it happens for most states. And in fact, I think Maryland, I don't know this right now. I was looking at it a little bit recently. So for right now, I practice only in the federal court. So the federal court is literally get someone to sponsor you, which my office here did it for me. Fill out your paperwork, show them you're a practicing attorney and you have a license that's good somewhere else. Keep that license good, and you'll keep your stuff here in the federal court. In the state courts here, there was like an attorney exam before.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't exactly the bar exam, but it was some sort of other exam that you used to have to take. And I think they just switched it in 2019 where you can kind of fill out paperwork and kind of waive in also. It's a longer process, but you can waive in also, I think. But yeah, every state is different. So certain states, I would absolutely have to take the bar exam again, which is why I don't move those.
That's what I'm saying. Like, that's why I'm here. And
I'm here. That would be a deal breaker. I'm just going to be honest.
That would be me, because I'll be like, once I take that exam and I'm good, like, what you mean I gotta take that again? I think I'm straight.
I remember taking the bar exam. That it was a summer, and studying with who's now my wife. She was my girlfriend at the time, but like I remember saying to her at one point, because we were just studying nonstop, and I looked at her, I was like, I'm never doing this again. Like, I'm passing this time, and that's it.
That's awesome, man. So I guess what was the most difficult part about your job so far? And I guess what is the most rewarding thing about your job?
The most difficult part, I think, honestly, is I really get to know my clients. I get to know their lives. I get to know their history. Difference between, like, say, practicing federal court, being a public defender in federal court as opposed to state court, you have way more cases, way more cases. So you don't have as much time per case, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here you do, and you have to use that time because the cases are more serious.
Right.
And you get to know your clients, you get to know their story. And I just saw, I have a lot of clients from Baltimore City itself, and you really get to see like how they got to where they are. I don't think anyone is born as a kid and thinks, I want to go to prison and I want to have a criminal record and I want to be a felon and all this other stuff. That doesn't happen.
Right.
And you see, I've seen too many instances of people in their lives that was just not fair. Like they didn't have, like there's some guys that I've had that just didn't have a shot. That's hard to see because it's like, now I have to say, all right, can you please give him less time than you're thinking, which is still a lot of time most times in prison. And I just see a constant stream of honestly, Black men that come through this system that didn't have a shot, even the blessings that I had, right? Did I grow up with privilege and wealth? No, but I had parents that were teachers. And that for me, I didn't go to the best schools all the time, right? But for me, I always had that at home. I was going to be reinforced with other things, and they just didn't have that shot, right? That's probably what saved my life, to be honest, right? And they didn't have that, and see that over and over and over again. It's just, it's hard because it's almost like, where do you start to help people, you know?
Mm-hmm.
For me, this is the work I always wanted to do, to help our people, you know, to help Black people, to help anybody, to be honest. It's not just about race, to be honest. But I know that the people that I have, the clients that I represent, without me, they wouldn't have anyone else, you know, and the satisfaction you get of doing a great job for somebody and doing really good work for them, and you put your heart and passion into your work, and they appreciate that. I've had clients say, like, you're the best lawyer I've ever had. And sometimes it's been for like minor things. Like the first time I ever told that was my first ever case. And it was because I called him to come to the court because he wasn't there yet and he would have got a warrant. Mm-hmm. That was honestly, selfishly, I don't want to wait here all day. And and so I call him. We get there. We do the case. Man, you're the best lawyer I've ever had. Man, you called me. You care.
Mm-hmm.
That type of interaction with people to help them however you can is that's the most rewarding thing about this work, for sure.
Yeah, I think, when I think about, people that do the work that you do, I mean, you can only compare it to like stuff you see in the movies. So what I see in the movies is disheveled dude with like a tie that's half on, that has a million cases, that just wants to get stuff over with. And it's like, all right, come on. Like,
right.
let's try to make a deal. Let's try to do something that doesn't really care about the individual or their story.
Yeah.
That's what I think of when I think of it, just directly. So I'm assuming that most people think that. So for you to say that, you take the time out to personally know their story, that I know that probably doesn't happen all the time, because you can easily, you start doing something 20, 30 years. I mean, by human nature, you could start to get a little checked out with different things. So you've been doing it for a while. The fact that you're still checked in, that's awesome. I'm sure they appreciate it as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I've seen that from even talented lawyers. Right? After a while, the work is heavy. It beats down people. It does happen. And to be clear, like, that stereotype is from somewhere. It's not from thin air, right? There are plenty of those lawyers out there in public defender offices and private also.
Mm-hmm.
What I've noticed and what became apparent to me in law school was like there's definitely a movement and a concerted effort to improve the quality of public defender offices that people receive, because the vast majority of people get represented by public defender offices as opposed to private lawyers.
Well, look, from the African American perspective, right?
Okay.
Let's get into that a little bit.
Absolutely.
Have you had to deal with racial issues growing up, or as you've transitioned into, being a lawyer, law school, and now, practicing law?
Absolutely. I mean, listen, I'm a Black man in America, right? And that reality is never lost on me any day of my life. It's just not. That's just kind of part of who we are, part of our reality. A reality I know you share. We've talked about this before,
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that's always present. It's something that always impacts you. Some days more than others, right? Some experiences more than others. Listen, I've been pulled over by police for no reason. I've been taken out of the cars for no reason. I've been called the N-word by police multiple times while they were on duty. And in fact, the only time in my life I've been called an N-word to my face was by on-duty police officers in uniform. Which you think about, right? I've been through those experiences, and I'll never forget what they feel like. I was just speaking to some law students at my old law school about things and some of these experiences. And even now, I was a practicing attorney with another Black lawyer, and we had guns pulled on us by the NYPD because they thought we were going to rob a cab.
Wow.
No, we were going to his girlfriend's house, right? Like, I was practicing law at that point. With a hood over my head in the cab, looked like I was going to rob him, So that stuff, it always reminds you, and when you go through that and you see it happen to other people, even if it's on TV or video, social media, you automatically reminds you of what you've been through. So like and like I said before, I had friends that went through the system, family members that went to prison and been through the system. So it's always there in my mind. It's always impacted me. I think as a lawyer, one thing I used to deal with a lot, honestly, in New York, especially when I was brand new out of law school, was I was automatically assumed to be somebody that had a case there, not as a lawyer, meaning like I had been arrested.
Even when you dressed up,
just dressed like this, even holding, like holding case files, right? And I'm like in the courtroom, and I've literally had court officers say to me, or other even prosecutors and police officers say to me, like, the front row is for lawyers only. And I'm like, God, like what? And literally have to deal with that. And then also understand that you have clients that are about to have cases. So me personally, who I am as a human being, I want to lose my mind right now because that is unbelievably offensive.
Right.
I got to perform in a minute, right? Like, because what he said to me is personal to me, but that's not my client's fault. And he still got a case, right? He could lose his liberty right now. So I have to be on, right? Mm-hmm. I remember one time I was supervising a young lawyer, a white attorney, really good guy. So I don't want to talk anything bad about him at all. This is not to date him in any way.
Right.
Great guy. I was supervising him on a trial. We go into the courtroom early, speak to the clerk. The clerk asks him his name. He says his name. And he turns to me. He's like, oh, is this your client? Mind you, I'm supervising him. There were I was literally telling him word for word, this is how you need to say this. Right. And in that moment, again, we're back to this place. I'm seeing red, right? I want to say something, but I have to deliver an opening statement in front of a jury in 10 minutes. You know what I mean? Like, it is what it, like, at that point, you got to you have to compartmentalize that and go about it. But like, is that infuriating? Obviously. Or even here now, like I was saying before, so many of my clients are black males from Baltimore City. I'm the only black male attorney here in this office in Baltimore. You know, that's
right. We talked a lot. I did not know that.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't always. It's happened that there were two others here in the office, two other black males in the office. They've gone on to other positions, and their positions have been filled by people that just aren't black males. I mean, and I'm not saying my office hasn't tried, because they have. You know, it's just the reality is 3% of lawyers are black.
Yeah.
You know, there's just not a large pool of it. And the reality is, too, for a lot of black people that go to law school, you got a large debt coming because of student loans. Your family didn't come from wealth. You're expected to make a lot of money. And starting out as a public defender, I was in New York City. I started in 2009. I made $50,000 a year. That was my salary. And now I had $75,000 in student loans right there at that time, which is higher now. But, you know, that's what it was at the time. Like, I was in the hole 75, making 50 a year. That's not an easy conversation to convince your mother.
No, because your lawyer is like, okay, where's the show me the money?
Why is my lawyer son making less than me as a special education teacher? That doesn't make sense, right? You know, but it was what it was. That's part of it. So it's hard. It's hard to, and there's especially in this system, right? There's certain things that I think we can understand better than someone that hasn't been through that experience. You know, just speaking about some of my experiences, you know, I'm sure you've been through a lot too, right? And you know, you would have a better understanding of those experiences than somebody that maybe has practiced in this courthouse for 20 years that's never been through that. Because one thing to like see it on paper, it's one thing to talk about it, it's one thing to even maybe see it on social media, it's another thing to be that person.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's reality. It's not enough represent. Sometimes you hear things that are said that are just totally, you know, tone deaf and not very sympathetic or empathetic, I think is a better word to say, to the people that go through it, you know. And it happens a lot. And not everyone thinks or views things the way you would or the way I would, or, you know, from this perspective. And that's kind of what we bring to the table. And that's why there's the need for more of us to do this work. And it's hard when it's only you sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I didn't know some of those things, Christian, and like I said, from my perspective, like, you know, I have the utmost respect for you, but even more so knowing that, because, you know, you're immersed with a culture of trying to help different people that look like you in an office that has nobody that looks like you. So that's, I mean, that you talking about wearing a weight, you know, we talking about wearing a weight as a regular lawyer, as a regular public defender, like you wear a certain weight. Your weight is more than the normal attorney's weight. I mean, that's safe to say because of who you are and your background and your culture. So, you know, the fact that, like I told you, we were joking before we got on camera, but I'm like, I don't see, you know, you're doing good because I don't see as many gray hairs as I think like I should see. You know what I mean? But so you're doing well. You know what I mean? You're handling the stress and the weight well, but I know that has to wear on you. So I appreciate everything that you're doing because it can't be easy. So shifting gears a little bit, who and what was like a motor? I know you talked about Johnny Cochran, right? Who was a hero to you, you know, in your life, and what gives you? I know the answer to the second question, and what gives you motivation every day to get up and go to work?
So for heroes in my life, I mean, I could think to different heroes I have historically, right? And it's kind of dawned on me recently. I was writing a bio for like and I hate writing bios, to be clear. I think it's really hard to do. It's one of the hardest things
to write about yourself. Yeah.
It's hard. It's really hard. I feel like I'm arrogant or something, right? No matter how you write it, it just feels arrogant to me.
Right.
But anyway, I was thinking about writing the bio. I was like, honestly, a lot of because you know, the question's posed, where does this desire to serve the public come from, to serve people? And honestly, man, my mother's a public school teacher. That's a hero for me, you know. And I didn't think about it at the time, but like she truly is, in the sense of my mother, you know, she's a 5 foot even Puerto Rican woman from Harlem, right? Not from Spanish Harlem, from Black Harlem, right? Adopted by a Black family, raised by a Black family. Father's a African-American male from Queens. But anyway, she taught in the Bronx. And then we moved up to Massachusetts at some point. We got up there through Connecticut. And the kids they used to have this designation of kids that were like behavior disorder kids. Mm-hmm. This is like, 90s, early 90s. And the kids that she dealt with that were behavior disorder anyway, were very much like a lot of the students she dealt with in regular education classes in the South Bronx at the time. So she was used to that. So they put her into that room. And realistically, there is no such thing as behavior disorder. That's ridiculous, right? They have other conditions. They may have mental health things that are going on. All of them needed IEPs for certain reasons, things like that. But they had special needs, not behavior problems, right? They're just like the problem kids, right? That's not what they were. They had behavior. They had mental health and special education needs that weren't addressed the right way, which is why they acted in the way they did at times. Mm-hmm. So what she ended up having to be was really a special education teacher and figure out how to do that. And that's kind of how she got into it. Mm-hmm. But what ended up happening, my mother at the time in the school she was in was the only person of color that was a teacher at all. The only one, right? And I went to that school for a while. So I was in school with my mother as a teacher in the school. So you can imagine how little I could act up because she would know. Because they were literally, my teacher was literally her coworker that knew her and could go talk to her. I 7th grade science class for me was literally next door to my mother's classroom. Like it's shared wall. You know what I mean? So I was all in the mix. They all knew who I was.
Did so well in school. Now we starting to understand.
So the reason I bring it up is that she had to work really hard and she had a lot of obstacles and she had a lot of the race dynamic stuff that I had to deal with also. And I would see her, she would stay there. I'll be with her, she'd be my ride home, obviously, right? And I would be there with her until 4 or 5 o'clock, doing lesson plans, doing IEPs for every student, sometimes driving the kids home, sometimes giving them different things that had nothing to do with her job, and just saw her dedication to them, to the people, and that was a huge, huge, huge influence on my life, because that's got to be where it started for me. I was taught about like the civil rights movement. I was taught about Black Power movement, Black Panthers, and the Young Lords of the Puerto Rican kind of version of the Black Panthers and all that stuff in New York and things like that. They were actively involved in that too. So my parents both instilled that in me a lot when I was growing up. I would say that, they watching my mother do that was definitely a hero for me for sure.
Yeah. And what motivates you every day? Like keeps you going every day?
Honestly, it's about the people, right? It's about the people. I think the system is very unjust at times. I think it's very brutal. I think it doesn't take into account how it's devastating people or what it does to a person and we don't think about it this way when we think about prison, right? If someone goes and does a prison sentence, but what would it be like if someone ripped you out of the community for 8 years and then was like, all right, good luck? What? Think about 8 years ago and all the stuff that's happened, whatever, there were longer sentences than that. I had a client that I got out of prison earlier this year who had done 20 plus years. When he went into prison, there weren't even cell phones really.
Right.
Not on the scale they are now. So he's like trying to look at stuff. He went into prison in 1995.
Yeah.
Right. He's out in 2020. And it's like, how do I work this iPhone thing? And I was teaching them how to work like FaceTime and things like that,
Yeah.
And I don't think people think about that. So realistically, like for me, even the days when I'm beat down, even the days when, life doesn't, I just don't want to I have a lot going on in life and I'm not motivated. The fact that my work literally entails helping people, but also like their ability to live, right? Their ability to not be in prison for 20 years or their life is at stake often. I have a lot of cases where the maximum penalty could be life in prison. They probably won't get life in prison, but just hearing that's a big deal, right? Especially when my client's 30 years old, he could be in prison for the next 40 years, 50 years, something like that. You don't have the luxury of not getting up and doing the work the right way. Right. Sometimes better than others, but I think that's the biggest driving thing for me. And also for my daughters to see that when you do something, you do it right or you don't do it. This is that important, and take pride in your craft.
Yeah,
So
two beautiful daughters, man. Beautiful wife, beautiful family, man. I wish we had a photo I could flash on a beautiful family. I probably don't know what they look like anymore, but beautiful, beautiful family.
well, it takes one to know one, brother. You got
I
two
know,
beautiful wife too. So
no, man. I mean, we exchange, photo exchange is what
right,
we
right,
do.
right.
What I guess if you and I've asked this question of everybody, so it's been interesting getting these responses. But if if you had one thing to do over again in your life, would you? And if you did, what would that be? If you had to do it?
So I guess to answer the second one first, I don't tend to think I would do things over, only because it's part of your journey. And you are who you are, and you get to where you are by learning lessons, right? And I can think of like failures I had, but what I have, the wisdom that I took from that failure, would it put me where I am now? I don't know. You can never know, right? Obviously, there are things I would love to do over. But I look at law school. I didn't go into it as deliberately as I probably should have. I knew what I wanted to do, but I wasn't good at planning out goals the way I should have, right? Long-term, intermediate, short-term goals, and being more detailed and deliberate with the goals. And I could have done that. So I kind of like took a windy, snaky path to where I'm at now, where it might have been easier to get to where I am. And who knows what that might have looked like. But at the same time, I guess to give an example, right? You look back at certain things. My second summer of law school, I got an opportunity to be a clerk for a federal judge in Ohio, where I went to school in Cleveland. It was a black judge, the only one on the bench up there. And I would work directly with him all summer. It's the opportunity of a lifetime. If anyone ever asked me in law school, yes, you take that job. And I didn't. I didn't. And I wanted to get out of Cleveland. Literally, that's why I didn't take it, which is ridiculous, right? It's such a juvenile.
Come on, man. LeBron's looking at you right now like Cleveland's not that bad. What's the problem?
LeBron's saying that from LA, though. But I mean, I didn't take the job because I needed a break from Ohio. And I went to work at the Public Defender Service in DC. And that was a great opportunity, too, to be clear. It was. That's considered, if not the best, one of the best public defenders in the world, and then definitely in the country, too. And it was an invaluable experience for me there. So you can look at it. If people were to look at it objectively, most people would say you need to take that federal clerkship and work for the judge, right? And that would have been a solid opportunity. I didn't do that. I had a great experience, but also when I went to DC, I met my wife. So things happen for a reason, right? I can right. Clearly I made the right choice.
Right. Good. Well, that's a good way to say, yeah, I would have made the same choices over again. Because Desiree would be like, listen,
I think for real though, the only thing I really regret is not thinking about, and I did do some moves. Like I went to Ohio because they gave me a scholarship at Case Western School of Law, and that's the reason why I was there. And that helped me invaluable. That was a lot of money that I got off of the bill. But I didn't think about student loan debt the right way. And that's my big regret, is not thinking about it. You always think in your mind, you're a student. I never came from money anyway. I'll get a job, I'll pay it off. I'll have money coming in, I'll be good. And then you think that's how it works, and it kind of is, but you don't realize that it can work that way for 20, 30 years too. And you don't want this huge debt over your head for that time. So I think I would have done that a little differently, or at least thought about how to pay off the loans a little bit quicker. Because now I got kids, I can't do that.
Hey, right. That's what I'm saying. You gotta get that off the books. There's some more stuff coming, so you gotta pay for them too. So exactly. I get it. So I'm looking behind you. I mean, I see the seem to be African art behind you.
Yeah.
What does Black History Month mean to you?
So for me, that was a lot of things, to be clear, but like I think growing up and in school, in our history books, Black history would be like 2-3 pages, maybe, probably not even that much, right? Civil rights movement would be like a paragraph or so, to be a picture of Dr. King, probably with the I Have a Dream speech, that type of thing, right?
14th Amendment, and they just
right? And the rest of it was like slavery. All right, we'll talk about slavery for a while, and we'll deal with it, and that was it. And you don't get it. I was blessed to have my parents that would reinforce that and make me learn about different things and read and force me to read. And I hated doing it at the time, to be clear. I didn't want to do it, but like it wasn't an option. It was mandatory. I'm glad they did. I thank them for that now. I try to instill that with my daughters. I read to them every night. And try to reinforce all these things. In any event, like Black History Month to me is just an acknowledgement of that. Black history is American history, right? And we need to acknowledge a lot of the accomplishments that have happened in our community and by our people, and recognize the greatness that has occurred and under crazy conditions, right? We came from we're a people that were brought here by force, that were forced to be slaves and forced to work for free in a society and an economy that when you work, you get paid for it. Maybe good, maybe not good. And that was for hundreds of years. And that's where we came from. I think about like how Frederick Douglass learned how to read by working at the ports here in Baltimore and tricking the white kids that work with him into telling him the right way to say certain nouns or certain letters and learn how to read that way. How amazing is that, right? And how I would never think to do that, I don't think, right? Mm-hmm. And these amazing accomplishments, which have been buried a lot and not talked about. And yeah, we hear about Frederick Douglass, but I only knew that, and I learned that as an adult because I read his book.
Right.
And then I had no idea that's how he learned how to read. And that's an amazing, amazing accomplishment that should be celebrated more than it is. So Black History Month to me is just like, it's been buried for so long. Let's talk about how amazing these accomplishments were, how amazing this history is, because it is American history. Is it a painful history to talk about? Sometimes it is, right? But it's a necessary one, and I think it should be acknowledged. So for me, it's a sense of pride and an acknowledgement of what has happened for our people.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And like I said, I think it's the same thing with myself. I mean, you don't learn anything. One of the most pivotal classes I tell people, I went to Bowie State and had a Black history class. And the way that, my history professor was talking, and I was so green that like they were saying certain stuff and I didn't know, like I just didn't. And they were looking at me and he was like nudging some of the cues that were in the class, like, could you believe this guy? Like he doesn't know what I'm talking about, and just talking about, Dubois and different others, like, I had no clue. Like I was just like, boom. So it just opened my eyes, and it's been open ever since, of trying to gain as much knowledge as I can. I look at Black History Month being, a chance to enlighten not just people that are not of color, but also people of color. I'm looking at people's timelines, looking at what's going on, or somebody's going to post something about Black history because I want to learn more. I know that I don't know everything. So if something piques my interest, I want to know something else. I'm all ears to it. So, appreciate your response to that, man. So I got one more question for you. Mm-hmm. What advice would you had a time machine, right? You travel back in time, looking suited up, the lawyer, go back and you meet your former self at 17 near his locker. What would you say? What advice would you have for him?
I think I would just say, believe in yourself more. You believe in yourself to a certain degree, however much that is. Don't listen to people that are going to try and discourage you. You will get that at every step of your path. I still get that today. That's part of life for whatever reasons. It just has been. But believe in yourself more, honestly, because you can do it. You can be great, right? And don't listen to the outside noise. Have your vision, have your focus, and just understand you are where you are, not by accident. It's not some luck. It's not some chance, not some hookup. You're at where you're supposed to be, and that's by design. That's where you should be. And just believe in yourself and understand that, yeah, it will get tough at times, but at the same point, if you work as hard as you can and you try and you're passionate about what you believe in and you stick to it, you'll get to wherever you need to go. Mm-hmm. I would say.
That's powerful advice, man.
I still need that today.
Right? That's great, man. Well, look, I can't be more appreciative, man. This has been an awesome interview. I know you're a busy guy. So, for you to take the time out to do this interview with everything you got going on, I'm forever in your debt for it. I appreciate it. I hope and I know that people that watch this are going to get something out of it. So I look forward to posting it, and like I said, I'll make sure to get that out to you and your family as well. But I appreciate it, brother. It means a lot.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate you asking me to be here. And honestly, you're a very humble person. I know this personally. But honestly, if I had a principal like you growing up, that would have made a huge difference, not just for me. There were plenty of people that I knew growing up that didn't actually make it, right? And for whatever a lot of different reasons, I think you're an unbelievable example for people coming up of any race, to be honest, but like specifically for Black boys that look up and don't have a role model necessarily and might look in the wrong places. Just to see somebody to know that they can do it is an unbelievable example. So I salute you, and I hope that you continue to do what you're doing, because you inspire me all the time, brother. I watch what you do for sure.
Hey man, trying to do it together. It's together we do that, man. So I appreciate it, man. And look, send the best to the family and everything else. And I'll be talking to you soon, man.
Absolutely.
All right.